Everyone, and welcome back to class. This week we are moving on to Unit 4. So we're now talking about epistemology. And epistemology is the area of philosophy that deals with knowledge. So now we're asking questions about what we know, what we don't know, which of beliefs are justified, what it takes for a belief to be justified, what it means to know something, uh, if we know anything at all. Those are sorts of issues that we're going to deal with in this unit. And so this week, we're starting with external world skepticism. So in this video, we're going to talk about what external world skepticism is, and then we're going to look at a couple arguments or a couple scenarios that are meant to convince us that we should be external world skeptics. So, what is external world skepticism? Well, in order to answer that question, we first need to ask, what do we mean by the external world? What does that mean? Because it's going to include a little bit more than you might expect it to. Because the external world doesn't mean everything that is external to us or to our bodies. The external world means everything that is external to your own mind. So your thoughts and your feelings and your memories are not part of the external world. They are part of your mind. But tables and chairs and other people are all part of the external world. So what counts as part of the external world is going to very slightly change from person to person, because I, including my mind, am part of the external world to you. And you, including your mind, are a part of the external world to me. But my mind is not part of the external world to me, and your mind is not part of the external world to you. So other people are part of the external world, but your own mind is not. So other people are part of the external world, and your own physical body is part of the external world. Your hands are part of the external world. So that's a little weird, because you don't think of your hands as being external to you. They're not outside of you. They're a part of you. But for the purposes of external world skepticism, even your own hands count as part of the external world. Your hands are not a part of your mind, and everything that is outside your mind is part of the external world in this sense. So things in the external world are sometimes called external objects. They are the objects that are out there in the external world. So you'll have to know this for the Unit 4 assignment. What is the external world and what are external objects? So your hands are external objects. Tables and chairs, external objects. Your friends, your family members, all external objects. And your internal organs are external objects, because those are not inside your mind. They exist outside of your mind. So that's the external world. It's everything that exists outside of your own mind. So what is external world skepticism? Now that we understand what the external world is, what is external world skepticism? Well, skepticism about X, for any X just a variable here, plug in whatever you want for X. Skepticism about X is the view or the belief that we don't or can't have any knowledge about X. So if you are a skeptic about morality, then you think we can't have any moral knowledge. We all might have beliefs about what's morally right or wrong, or we might have opinions if you think morality is a matter of opinion. But a moral skeptic, a skeptic about morality, says that none of us can ever know for sure what's morally right and morally wrong. None of our moral beliefs count as knowledge. Our beliefs are just things we think are probably true. They're not real knowledge. You don't really know what's right or wrong, according to the moral skeptic. So, external world skepticism is skepticism about the external world. So, the external world skeptic says that we cannot have any knowledge about the external world. So, if you are an external world skeptic, then you think that you cannot know anything about the world that exists outside of your own mind. So, you don't know that there are any such things as tables. You don't know that trees exist. You don't know that your own hands exist. If external world skepticism is true, the external world skeptics thinks you don't know for sure anything about the world outside of you. You don't know that tables and chairs exist. You don't know that your hands exist. You don't know that your family and friends exist. You believe they exist. You think they exist. But the external world skeptic thinks that you don't really know that they exist. You don't know for sure that your own friends and family exist. You don't know for sure that your own feet exist. So, why be a skeptic? Why would we think that external world skepticism is true? Given that it seems like we pretty clearly do know things about the external world. So we know that tables and chairs are real. You know that I am real and that this class is real. You know that your friends and family are real, right? Don't you? We all sort of assume. We walk around assuming that we do know all that stuff. And it seems kind of crazy, frankly, to think we don't, to think we can't. We can't know anything about whether or not our friends and family exist, whether or not our house or our apartment exists. Like, external world skepticism is a really strong belief, is a really strong claim to make. So, why think it's true? Well, uh, everything we know about the external world ultimately comes from our senses. So, our senses tell us that there is a wall in front of us. Uh, your eyes are telling you that there is a screen in front of you where you're watching this. Uh, if you knock on a table or a chair, your sense of touch tells you that there is a solid object that you're making contact with. So our senses, sight, smell, all that, are how we find out about the world. They are the source of all information we have about the world around us. But our senses are sometimes untrustworthy. There are optical illusions. There are hallucinations, both visual hallucinations and auditory hallucinations. There are audio illusions where it sounds like something that isn't there. If you play certain bells, it sounds like the pitch keeps rising, but it's not actually rising. It's an illusion. All of your senses can lie to you. Uh, your senses are not 100% reliable. So your senses, even if they tell you the truth most of the time, your senses can sometimes mislead you. Your senses can sometimes lead you astray. And your senses can sometimes lie to you. Your eyes, your ears, your sense of touch, your tongue and your nose can all be wrong sometimes. Now, if we can't trust our senses, and we're not saying yet that we can't, we're just saying, hey, they're not 100% reliable. So if it turns out that we cannot trust our senses, then that means we cannot trust any of our beliefs that were formed from sensory experience. If we can't trust the information our senses are giving us, then we can't trust any of our beliefs that we formed using that information. So if you believe that there is a screen in front of you because you are looking at it with your eyes, and your eyes are telling you, you're telling your brain that there's a screen in front of you, if your eyes aren't trustworthy, then the information that your eyes are sending to your brain about there being a screen in front of you, that information is not trustworthy because it came from an untrustworthy source, your eyes. But if that information is not trustworthy, then your belief in that information is not trustworthy either. It's not reliable. And so it doesn't count as knowledge. So, everything we know about the external world comes from our senses: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, touch, etc. So, our senses are not completely reliable, but they are our only source of information about the outside world. Our five senses are the only sources of information we have about the external world. So, if we cannot trust our senses, then we cannot trust anything that we think about the external world. So nothing that we believe about the external world really counts as knowledge because we don't know it for sure. Because our senses are untrustworthy, our senses aren't reliable, and so they might, for any given piece of information our senses are telling us, that information might be wrong. And if it might be wrong, then we don't know it for sure. And so it doesn't count as knowledge. And so there are several skeptical scenarios that are meant to try to convince us that we really can't be certain that our senses are telling us the truth. We really can't be sure that our senses are telling the truth. So we might be dreaming. Descartes raises the possibility of an evil demon. And there's also, it's called the brain in a vat scenario. And there's also something called Boltzmann's brains, which we're not going to talk about. But if you look at the dreaming, the evil demon in the brain in the vat scenario, and you think that's all stupid, it's hypothetical, it's never going to happen, I encourage you to Google Boltzmann brains and read the Wikipedia article, because the idea is that empirically, you probably are, statistically, you probably are a Boltzmann brain, which means all of your sensory experiences probably are not right, probably are hallucinations. If you ever heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about whether or not we're in an ancestor simulation, same concept as the Boltzmann brain thing. So let's look at some skeptical scenarios. So the first scenario is dreaming. So we all dream, we all sleep sometimes, and when we sleep, we dream. And when you're dreaming, you don't know that you're dreaming. Now, some people lucid dream sometimes, but even the people who can lucid dream often don't. And many people never have lucid dreams where they know they're dreaming. So most of the time, if you're dreaming, then you don't know that you're dreaming. You're not aware of the fact that you're dreaming. You think that you're awake and that everything in the dream is really happening, but it's not. It's a hallucination. Every night, you go into a small miniature coma and you hallucinate vividly for several hours, and then you wake up and you act like that's a normal thing, and we never really talk about how weird that is as a society. But it is very weird. And that's what's happening. You're going unconscious and then hallucinating and believing that the hallucination is really happening. That's what dreams are. So, how do you know that you're not dreaming right now? Right? How can you be sure that you're not dreaming right now? You believe that you're awake, but you also believe you're awake when you're not, when you're dreaming. If you were dreaming right now, you would still believe that you were awake. When you dream, you think you're awake. And when you're awake, you think you're awake. So the fact that you think you're awake, the fact that it feels obvious to you that you are awake, isn't actually any kind of evidence that you're awake, because you would still think that, you would still believe that, you would be exactly as certain if you weren't awake, if you were wrong, if you were dreaming. But if you're dreaming, then nothing that you think you're experiencing is really happening. So, can you ever be certain that you aren't dreaming? So, it looks like the answer is no. Because however sure you feel that you're awake, you would be exactly as sure if you were dreaming. And no matter how weird the dream is in retrospect when you wake up, it always feels normal. It doesn't feel weird when you're in it. So you might think, all right, I know I'm not dreaming because when I'm dreaming, everything's super weird and there's like a tiger with my grandmother's face on it and it's chasing me around or whatever your dreams are like. I don't know. Uh, they're always weird though. Dreams are weird, is the point I'm trying to get at. But in the dream, it feels normal. So maybe you're dreaming right now, and there's something super weird about this scenario, and you just don't see what it is because you're dreaming. Or maybe you're just having a really boring dream where you're dreaming that you're watching a lecture video about dreaming. I mean that's possible, right? It's possible to have boring dreams about being in class and nothing happens. So you could be dreaming right now. It looks like you can't be certain, 100% certain that you're not dreaming. Because when you're dreaming, you think you're awake, and when you're awake, you think you're awake. So dreams feel as real when you're in them as the real world does when you're awake. So you're confident that you're awake when you're dreaming. So you seem to have evidence that you're awake and that the world around you is real. Right now, you seem to have evidence that you're awake and the world around you is real. But you would have all that same evidence if you were dreaming. Your senses would be telling you all the same information if you were dreaming. So that's how hallucinations work. So when you're dreaming, you seem to be seeing and hearing things around you. You seem to have evidence that you're awake, even when you're dreaming. But when you're dreaming, none of those things are actually happening. It's all in your head. If you are, right now, if you're dreaming, then that means you're not actually watching this lecture video. So you believe that you're watching a lecture video right now. But if you're dreaming, then that's not true. That's false. So if you don't know for sure that you're not dreaming, if you don't know for sure that you're awake, then you don't know for sure that you're watching a lecture video right now. Because if you're dreaming, then you aren't watching a lecture video right now. So in order to know that you're watching this lecture video right now, you have to know that you're not dreaming. And it looks like you can't know that because when you are dreaming, you have exactly the same evidence that you have when you're awake. You're exactly as confident as you are. You're exactly as confident that you're awake as you are when you're actually awake. So if you were dreaming that you were watching this class, you would believe that you were awake and really watching this class, watching this lecture video. You'd be exactly as confident as you are now that you're awake, but you would be wrong. And so you don't really have any basis for ruling out the possibility that you're dreaming. You don't really have any basis for ruling out the possibility that you're wrong and you're not actually watching this lecture video. Any reason you have for thinking that you're awake right now also applies when you're dreaming. You have all those same reasons to think you're awake when you're dreaming. And so you don't really know that you're awake. you don't have any reason to think you're awake now that you wouldn't also have if you were dreaming. So you don't really have any reason to think you're not dreaming right now. And that means that you don't know that you're awake. But if you don't know that you're awake, then you don't know that everything that you think is happening around you is really happening. You don't know that the stuff that's happening around you is real, because if you're dreaming, then it isn't. So here's the core argument, sort of laying it out with premises. One, you don't know that you're not dreaming. For all you know, you might be dreaming. It's possible. It's a possibility that you can't rule out. Because if you were dreaming, you'd have all the same evidence, have all the same reasons, and be just as confident in thinking that you're awake as you do when you're actually awake. But if you don't know that you're not dreaming, then you don't know anything about the external world around you. Because if you are dreaming, then all your beliefs about the world around you are false. You're not actually sitting and watching this lecture video. You're not in whatever room you think you're in. You're not awake. So you don't know anything about the external world around you. That's the conclusion. So you don't know that you're not dreaming. If you don't know that you're not dreaming, then you don't know anything about the external world. Therefore, you don't know anything about the external world. That's the core dreaming argument here. Now, here's another scenario, the evil demon scenario. So Descartes talks about dreaming, but he also talks about the evil demon. Because Descartes thinks, look, dreaming can give me some doubts, sure. But I definitely didn't invent the concept of a chair. If there's a chair in my dream, it's because I've seen chairs before. Dreams are just throwing together bits and pieces of stuff I've seen and heard. That's all a dream really is. It's using things that my brain remembers and putting them together in weird, different ways. So Descartes thinks, all right, even if I'm dreaming, there are still some things about the external world that I know. I know that people exist because there are people in my dream, and I didn't invent the concept of people. I know that tables and chairs exist. I know if I dream about being on the phone, I know phones exist. So I still know some things about the external world, Descartes thinks, even if I'm dreaming. But what if I'm worse off than just dreaming? What if there's something worse than that? So Descartes says, look, suppose that instead of dreaming, you're being actively and intentionally deceived by a powerful evil demon. What is the evil demon? Who's to say? Demons work in mysterious ways in Descartes' 1500s mind. It's not clear why the demon has these motives to deceive you for, I don't know, fun. But Descartes says, look, hypothetically, let's suppose that there is a powerful evil demon that has magic powers and is actively trying to deceive you. It's trying to get you to have false beliefs. The demon's whole goal in life, if demons count as being alive, I'm not really clear on that. The demon's whole goal in life is to trick you into having false beliefs. So the demon causes you to hallucinate. The demon throws away all of your memories and gives you a bunch of false memories in their place. The demon clouds your judgment so that you can't really think straight, but you feel like you're thinking straight. The arguments you're making are actually irrational, but they feel rational to you. So the demon's whole goal is to trick you into having false beliefs and to deceive you constantly. Basically, the demon deceives your sense organs so that you think you're having all these experiences and you think you've had all these past experiences, but really, All your sensory perceptions are hallucinations caused by the evil demon. And all of your memories are false memories implanted into your brain. If any of you have seen the movie Total Recall, there's Arnold Schwarzenegger gets false memories implanted into his brain. And that's, or he tries to, because it's the future and that's a thing that people pay for. Like, that's what the evil demon's doing here, shoving false memories into your brain to trick you into believing you've had this past life with tables and chairs that are real, but really there's no such thing as tables and chairs. The demon made that up to trick you into thinking there were tables and chairs. Like, the world is just, in this hypothetical scenario, the world is just very different than you think it is. All of your beliefs, all of your memories, everything you've ever experienced is just a hallucination or a false memory implanted by the demon in order to trick you into being wrong. So the actual world, the external world outside your mind, is nothing like you think it is. It's nothing. There are no people. The demon made up humans. You don't know what human body looks like. You don't know what space or time, how those work. They work very differently than you think they do. Everything you believe about the external world comes from your sense organs and your memories, and all of that is false, put there by the evil demon to deceive you. So if the evil demon is real, which he's not, but let's say he is, if he's real, then nothing that you've experienced really happened, and nothing that you think exists really exists. Everything that you think is real, everything you believe exists, family, friends, tables, chairs, cars, trees, ducks, all of that was made up by the evil demon. None of it's real. None of those things exist in this scenario. All of it is a lie. So, obviously, if the evil demon is real, if this scenario is real, which it's not, but if it is, if it were, then all of your beliefs about the external world would be false. Not just the, like, what room are you in and what are you doing right now kind of beliefs that we worry about in the dreaming case, but all of your beliefs about what exists and about what kinds of things exist, all of that is false in the evil demon scenario. And so Descartes thinks, look, such a demon is at least logically possible. We can't, like, provide a rigorous logical proof that there is no such evil demon. And we can't rule the demon out by our sense perceptions. It can't be ruled out by empirical evidence. Because any perceptions that you have could just have been caused by the demon. If the evil demon is real, then of course it's going to hide its own existence and not give you any evidence that it exists. It's trying to trick you into having false beliefs. So none of your sensory perceptions give you any evidence that the demon's not real. Because if the demon were real, you would have all the same beliefs. You would have all the same evidence. You would have all the same sensory perceptions if the demon were real. So, since you'd have the same perceptions either way, none of your sensory perceptions can give you evidence that the demon is not real. So, weird as it seems, Descartes thinks we have no evidence that there's no demon. We can't prove it logically through, like, logic and rational thinking alone. And we can't prove it empirically with evidence and sensory perceptions and things, because those are all, in this scenario, subject to the demon's control. So Descartes thinks we have no, technically speaking, we have no evidence that the demon doesn't exist. Which means that you don't technically know that there isn't a demon deceiving you. There probably isn't one. It'd be crazy if there were. That's a ridiculous thing to believe. Descartes thinks if your takeaway from this is that you believe that there really is an evil demon, then you're nuts. That's a mistake. You shouldn't conclude that. There almost definitely isn't an evil demon trying to deceive you. But to know that there isn't an evil demon trying to deceive you, you'd have to have some evidence, either sort of pure logic proof or empirical evidence. But you have no such evidence. By design, you can't have evidence that there's no demon, and you can't rule it out through logic alone. So you don't really have evidence. So you don't really know for sure that there's no evil demon, Descartes thinks. But if you can't be certain that there's no demon, then you can't be certain that any of your perceptions are true. Because if the demon were real, then all of your perceptions would be false. So if you don't know for sure that the demon's not real, then you don't know for sure that your perceptions are correct. You don't know for sure that the external world is at all like you think it is. Because you don't know for sure there's no evil demon. And if there is an evil demon, then all of your external world beliefs are false. So the fact that you don't know for sure whether or not there's an evil demon means you don't know anything about the external world. If there's an evil demon, then all of our sensory perceptions are false. But everything you believe about the external world is based on your sensory perceptions, sight, sound, touch, etc. Those are the only ways we have of finding out about the external world. So if you can't trust your sensory perceptions, if your sensory perceptions are all false, the way they are in the evil demon scenario, then all of your beliefs that you have about the external world are uncertain. If it's even possible that there's an evil demon misguiding you and causing you to have false perceptions, then it's possible that your beliefs about the external world are wrong. And so you don't know anything about the external world, for sure. You can't be certain about anything in the external world. You don't even know that you have hands, or that you're a human being, or that there's any such thing as hands, or any such thing as a human being. Because that is all based on your sensory perceptions. You see and feel and touch your hands. You have seen other human beings. You have read things about what human beings are. But if all of your sensory perceptions and memories are false, then all of that information is false too. There are no hands. There are no human beings. You are not a human being. You do not have hands. If there's an evil demon sending you all false beliefs. So Descartes' evil demon argument is meant to show that we can't know anything about the external world. He's not trying to argue there really is an evil demon. He's not trying to argue that you should act as if there might be an evil demon. But he thinks that you can't completely rule out the possibility. Even if it's a ridiculous possibility, he thinks you can't completely rule it out. And if you can't rule it out, then you don't really know that it's false. You don't really know that there's no evil demon if you can't rule it out. But if you don't know there's no evil demon leading you astray, then you don't really know anything about the external world. So our beliefs about the external world might well be true. But even if our beliefs are true, they don't really count as knowledge. Because even if they happen to be true, they could be wrong. Even if they actually are true, they could be wrong. For all we know, they could be false. And so even if we have true beliefs about the external world, Descartes thinks we don't have knowledge of the external world. And that's the evil demon scenario. Now, talking about demons and evil demons and hallucinations and magic powers is a little weird. So if you like things with a slightly more science and technology type of flavor, or if you just like the movie The Matrix, here's the brain in a vat scenario. This is a sort of modern, updated version. And you may notice some parallels to the experience machine. It is a lot like the experience machine. So, here's the idea. Suppose, hypothetically, that there is a brain in a vat. It's a brain, and it's not in a human skull. It's just floating in a vat. There's some fluid in there to sort of keep the brain alive. And the brain is plugged into a computer simulation, like the Matrix or like the experience machine. The brain is fed electrical signals that perfectly mimic the electrical signals sent by the sense organs of a human being walking around the world having normal experiences. So therefore, this brain, which for its entire existence has been fed electrical signals that perfectly mimic the signals sent by sense organs of a human being walking around in the world having normal experiences. This brain thinks that it is a person with a human body walking around, eating lunch, watching philosophy videos, doing all the things we normally do, right? As far as this brain knows, it's just living a normal life, walking around town in a human body, because that's what its sense organs or its sense organ receptors are telling it. Those are the signals the brain's getting sent. So that's what the brain thinks is happening. Now, in the experience machine, we sort of had this scenario, but the brain or the person was being fed the experiences that would make them happiest. Now, instead of that, let's imagine that this brain in a vat with no human body is being fed the exact same electrical signals that your brain is being sent by your sensory organs throughout your life. So the brain has existed for exactly as long as you have existed, and the brain, since the day you were born, the brain in the vat has been getting the exact same electrical signals sent to its visual cortex that your eyes have been sending to the visual cortex. Its auditory cortex or processing center or whatever you call it has been getting the exact same signals that your ears have been sending to your brain. And similarly for touch and taste and smell. This brain in a vat has all of the perceptions that you have. And so it has always had all of the perceptions that you have ever had. And so the brain in a vat has all of the memories that you do and all of the beliefs that you do. So the brain believes that it is taking Philosophy 1500 major issues, that it's looking at PowerPoint slides posted to YouTube, and that it's learning about brains in vats. Maybe the brain's sitting there thinking, well, I'm not a brain in a vat. This is stupid. Maybe you're thinking that. Maybe the brain in a vat's thinking that. But the brain in a vat has all of the same evidence for an external world that you have. The brain has gotten all of the exact same sensory perceptions throughout its life. And so it has the exact same evidence of the external world that you have. Everything you've ever seen, the brain has seen. Everything you've ever heard, the brain has heard. Except when the brain saw it and heard it, it was just a hallucination fed to it by a computer. So it wasn't true. It wasn't veridical. So from the brain's perspective, it's had the exact same experiences that you have had. There's no difference whatsoever in what it's like to be you and what it's like to be the brain in a vat. The way it feels to the brain from the inside, like from its own conscious experience, is exactly the same as it feels to you on the inside. Exactly the same as it feels for you from the inside as a person having your own conscious internal experience. So, Here's the question. Given all that, how do you know that you're not the brain in the vat? How do you know that you are the person with a human body actually watching YouTube lecture videos rather than the brain floating in a vat being fed electrical signals that mimic watching YouTube lecture videos? It seems perfectly possible for there to be brains in vats. I mean, the basic idea of sending electrical signals to a brain that mimics sense organs, that's not crazy and impossible. There's work being done on that to try to get better, more high-tech prosthetics for people. That's like an active research project right now. So sending electrical signals to a brain that mimics sense organ signals, that's not outside the realm of possibility. The technology of doing that's not that far-fetched. So how do you know that you're not the brain in a vat? How do you know that you're not a brain in a vat floating in a tank somewhere in the distant future? You think that you're living in the year 2020, but maybe you're just a brain in a vat being fed these experiences way in the distant future. Maybe they're trying to learn about how people acted during the 2020 pandemic. Maybe they're trying to learn about the 21st century educational system. Who knows why they're doing it, but they put a brain in a vat and it's being fed experiences, and maybe you are that brain in a vat. So how do you know that you're not the brain in a vat? Well, the brain in a vat has the exact same thoughts, exact same beliefs, exact same memories, exact same perceptions, exact same everything that you do. So what evidence could you possibly have that you aren't a brain in a vat? It looks like you couldn't have any evidence. You can't possibly have evidence that you're not a brain in a vat, even in principle. You can't have evidence that you're not a brain in a vat, because if you were a brain in a vat, by definition, you would have all the exact same experiences that you have now. So no experience that you point to will prove that you're not a brain in a vat. Any experience you try to point to show that you're not a brain in a vat, you could have had that same exact experience if you were a brain in a vat. So there's nothing you can point to show that you're not a brain in a vat. So you can't have any evidence that you are a person in a human body. You can't have any evidence that you're not a brain in a vat. And therefore, since you have no evidence that you aren't a brain in a vat, you don't know. You don't know for sure that you're not a brain in a vat. You might believe it. You might even probably be right, overwhelmingly probably. But you don't know because you can't rule it out. Because any evidence you have that you're not a brain in a vat, you would also have if you were a brain in a vat. But here's the thing. Once it's possible that you're a brain in a vat being fed electrical signals, there's no need for those electrical signals to match up with the world outside the vat in any way whatsoever. Maybe you're a brain in a vat being fed electrical signals that don't line up at all with what the world used to be like, or what the world is currently like, or what the world was ever anywhere close to like. Maybe you're being fed electrical signals mimicking sensory perceptions in a weird and wild world that's nothing like the actual world. Maybe everything you're being fed from the computer into your brain in a vat, maybe all of that is wildly different than the way the world actually is or ever was. That seems possible. So if you're a brain in a vat, then you have no information about the external world. None at all. You don't even know that there are brains and that there are vats, because that's all. Your idea of what a brain is and what a vat is are based on your experiences, which, if you're a brain in a vat, are all nonsense. They're all false hallucinations and made up things that were sent into your brain by electrical signals. None of it's real. So all you have to go on are the signals sent to your brain. That's true no matter what. That's true whether you're a brain in a vat or an actual person walking around the world in a human body. Either way, all you have to go on to figure out what's happening in the world are the signals sent to your brain. But those signals might not be representative of what the world is really like. If you're a brain walking around in a human body, then those signals hopefully do represent the world as it actually is, at least most of the time. I mean, no one's perfect. We all, you know, suffer optical illusions and things sometimes. Our senses are never 100% reliable. But if your brain is in a human body walking around the world, then all right, your signals, the signals being sent to your brain, probably do represent the world as it really is. But if you're a brain in a vat, then those signals do not represent the world as it is at all. So the world outside the vat might not contain any chairs or trees or people or planets or plants or ducks or mole rats or anything even remotely similar to anything you've experienced. Because all the information you have about the outside world just comes from these electrical signals, which don't have to line up with the way the world actually is at all. So if you're a brain in a vat, then everything you think you know about the external world is wrong. None of your experiences were real, and none of the things you think you've seen or heard really exist, if you're a brain in a vat. So if you can't be certain that you're not a brain in a vat, if you can't know for sure that you aren't a brain in a vat, then you can't be certain of anything about the external world. You can't know for sure anything about the external world. So if you don't know that you're not a brain in a vat, then you don't know anything about the external world. And so here's the core argument. It's the same as the dreaming argument. So look, you don't know that you're not a brain in a vat, because if you were a brain in a vat, you'd have exactly the same evidence as you currently have. But if you don't know that you're not a brain in a vat, then you don't know anything about the external world. Because if you were a brain in a vat, then all your beliefs about the external world would be false. And obviously, if your beliefs are false, then they don't count as knowledge. You can only know true things. That's part of knowledge. We'll talk about that in 2 weeks. But it follows from you don't know that you're not a brain in a vat, and if you don't know that you're not a brain in a vat, then you don't know anything about the external world. It follows from those two that you don't know anything about the external world. So the ultimate point is this. Whether we're looking at the dreaming version or the evil demon version or the brain in a vat version, the ultimate point is we can't prove that we aren't dreaming or being deceived by an evil demon or aren't a brain in a vat. We can't prove that we aren't in a skeptical scenario. But if we can't prove that we're not in a skeptical scenario, then we can't prove that the external world exists. Because if we were in a skeptical scenario, then none of the external objects that we think exist would be real. So that means that we can't prove any of our most basic beliefs because we can't prove that our evidence for them, like the fact that we can see our own hands, is real visual perception. Because it might be a big hallucination fed to us by a dream, a computer, or a demon. And so it looks like if someone is skeptical about the external world, if someone believes they don't know anything about the external world, that they don't know for sure that the external world exists, it looks like there's nothing you can do to convince them that they're wrong. There's nothing you can do to convince them that they do have knowledge of the external world. Because anything that you try to do to convince them, they will say could be a hallucination fed to them by a brain in a vat or an evil demon. If you kick them in the shin as hard as you can and they feel pain, they'll say, wow, the evil demon really wanted me to feel pain. Or, wow, the computer simulation programmed in a lot of pain today. Or whatever. If they think they don't have knowledge of the external world, that means they doubt all of their sensory perceptions. But that's the only way you can get information to them, is through their senses. You either talk and they hear it, or you write and they read it and they see it, or you, like, I don't know, poke them in Morse code or something and they feel it. Anything that you try to convey to them, to convince them that they do have knowledge of the external world, that could all be part of the big hallucination. So if someone's a skeptic, it looks like there's nothing you can do to convince them they're wrong. So the question is, are they wrong? And that's what we're going to talk about next week. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.